give them any presenters who presented today, please go ahead and start asking questions. You don't have to write them. It's just very informal Q&A session. Okay. Okay. So anybody?
Well, I guess just one comment is that it seems like we're quite aligned in the progress of the different perspective, in the sense that we're looking at how decisioning is becoming more of a central point in organizations, and how the machine learning and the generative AI movement. I think a few years ago, we were saying, why are we getting passed in the curve by machine learning? And now we're looking more on how do we embrace this movement and bring value to this movement. So I think that's a very positive move on our part, to look at how do we embrace that technology movement to support what our overall goal was always, which is to support organizational decision.
Yeah.
And the same is probably true for generative AI. We started with, it's not the same as decision modeling, and now we say, how can we join forces?
Yes, that's true. We actually will have a panel tomorrow, so if you want to save this question, we still will have presentation, for example, from Jan van Sienen. It would be similar, not similar, but using the same technology. And it's a question what Gary said. It's a big difference if we generate a decision model or if we actually make a decision through GPT. It's a huge difference, and we have to consider something what is important. When people asking me to explain this, what does it mean? And I usually say that it's actually, even we can be skeptical today, but it's a huge change in the very concept what we all used in our professional life. When we always had source, we can write code and produce results. Now it's we're not sure it's deterministic or not. And during the time when we execute next time our model, maybe it will become smarter, because knowledge comes from different sources and they constantly changing themselves. So this is good, and it's also bad. So it's like I usually try, what do you think about this comparison when we're talking about self-driving cars? And we're still thinking about car what we all get used to. But probably real self-driving cars, what our grandkids will drive, and when they tell, were you crazy driving cars? So this probably they would be different, because probably it would be different road. So I can imagine this not the same car. It's a car when for example, wheels can be turned 90 degree and move to this conveyor, not road. And I would tell, I'm going from New York to Philadelphia. Okay, and that's it, click button. And then it will tell me, it will move me to the right lane. It will do something without me. And it's not the same car. Design of the car would be different. The same thing here. Probably our design would be different. It's not automating what we get used to. That's the feeling what I have. What is your feeling?
No, I think you have a good point, is that we always frame the problem in our current perspective, but as things change, we're going to reframe the problem, which will therefore reframe the solution. What's also interesting in a lot of what we've talked today, and Alan's presentation alluded to this, is our capability to start addressing more strategic type of decision, as opposed to just operational repetitive decision. And how do we get access to really model strategic type of decisions? So that's I think it's going to be quite a big movement for us in the decision automation world.
Gary, based on your experience with generating quite serious model, and you just concentrated only on generation of Python. So what would you say about these dramatic changes potentially?
Well, yeah, Python and also JSON, right, which was probably an order of magnitude more, seemed to be more challenging for the LLM. So I was saying this morning, I mean, I think the generate and test that OpenAI has incorporated into the GPT code interpreter now, advanced data analysis was kind of brilliant, because like I said before, you would have to beg and plead, in your prompt, please, don't check the schema, check it twice, and the last thing you do, please don't generate anything that's not valid to the schema. Well, now it's kind of, in its inner loop that it won't, because it has an independent verification, right? It actually runs Python code. And, it does that for many things, right? I mean, just even the Python interpreter, it would generate bad code previously, but now, with this extra feature, it has a Python sandbox, in your chat session. So when it says this is the Python, it actually, interprets the Python, maybe even with the test case. So you're much more sure. So, these little steps, right? Even when you're with your self-driving, right? I mean, I read the other day that San Francisco and other places, it's actually in production, taxi service, and the simplification there is that if you think about it, the taxi is always driving on the same, 20 square blocks, say, of a downtown. And so, it's a much more constrained problem. It can really know every single pothole, every single traffic light, every single issue, every single image, every street corner it's seen, been trained on millions of times. And so, I always think, living in Oregon and being an avid skier, when would I ever be able to just hop in my car and ask it to take me to the ski slope in a blizzard? That's a much harder problem, So, but yeah, I think everybody's obviously amazed at how good the LLMs are. Sometimes I just think, well, maybe humans weren't that smart after all. Maybe it's not that hard of a problem.
Okay. More questions?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a cam on because it's 11 p.m. here, but
It's
I was
okay.
listening to your comparison to self-driving car. And when I was today listening in about large language models and how we currently are in some confusion when we don't know what actual source is. Is it actual prompt, or is it actual output, or is it actual model itself? So before all this revolution started, there was a lot of things about and thoughts, and probably I'm going more to philosophical side here, but there are a lot of thoughts about like self-awareness and how do we treat AI and what is AI and what is not. And as always, humans, when we try to predict the future, we predict it completely differently when it turns out to be. So like a typical trope 50 years ago was that like in 21st century will be flying cars everywhere. And we're in 21st century, there are a lot of new things, but no flying cars. So maybe this going to this your remark, Jacob, about what is the actual source. So maybe we can treat in this case the large language model as an actual developer, like we treated a developer like 10 or 20 years ago, when you would go and ask and say, please write me a program, or please write me an algorithm, or create a model, because now it's kind of similar. We work out with the prompts like Gary was telling about, and we are trying to convince it to produce some output, and we get the output, which is generated code. And like from philosophical perspective, we get this entity which produced it, which is neither source nor a person, but it's actually involved in development. And that's kind of fascinating when you think about it from a philosophical perspective. And maybe that's where it's turning out to be, how this AI will be part of the not only development process, but the community overall.
Yes, that's all good points. What I want just to say for tomorrow discussion and in general for the decision camp, this kind of discussion, what is intelligence, what is not intelligence, how smart our system should be, they belong to generic conferences. We really want to concentrate on decision management and how this new technology affects our real world useful tools or decision models, how they would change. And I really hope we will stick to this discussion. An example of what today we saw from Denis in particular, very, very particular examples when he decided to add this source and automate this source. The same thing Gary put in real something tangible. It's not just discussion what you can read everywhere from Gary Marcus or from any other philosophers. Let's try to stick to this topic, at least on this conference, and be more practical. Actually, until this decision camp, we really try to avoid the word AI, right?
It's not like a real proposition. It's more like
it's
from a
free
practical
discussion
perspective when you would
But you, an author, being an author of Rule Engine, right, Rimantas, you should just consider how your Rule Engine will change. That's what is really interesting.
Yes.
So let's be more particular in tomorrow's discussion. Prepare questions for tomorrow. And one special question to Gary, because I just don't know answer. When can it learn from its own decision system? For example, if it's produced JSON, or if it's produced JSON model, or if it's produced Python code, can it learn can it use this information when it produces next decision?
I'm not an expert on how these work internally, but I think the answer is a little bit, because all of these systems, right? I mean, if you peel it back, and get to the API, they're just sort of stateless. They're kind of one shot. You give it the input, right, the prompt, and it gives you the completion. Mm-hmm. So the way these chats work is, everything that you say in the chat goes into the prompt. You just don't see it, right? But it's there.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much that it assimilates. Say when I uploaded that JSON schema, I don't think it adds that to the prompt, because that was kind of the secret sauce that they added that made a lot of things that I did possible. When I was struggling with it before, you actually did have to put the JSON schema in the prompt every single time. And you can see as the prompt gets bigger, right, it has this context window. Now they keep making it bigger. I don't know what they're using under the covers. Maybe it's 8K or something like that. And there's rumors that it's going to go up to 64K. I think not too long ago, it was limited to 1 and 2 or 4K. And so what that means is that long conversations, basically, the first things that you said, or maybe the middle things, or however it does the memory management, sort of fall off the end. And so you really experience this, when you have these long chats, and it comes back and says, now what would you like me to do next? And he's like, well, I'd like you to finish the prompt, what I asked you to do, but it's forgotten, And so when it does make some of these mistakes, you would see it making similar mistakes, but it wouldn't necessarily make the same mistake right in a row, because I think it kind of appends the mistake or some information about it for the next iteration. And so it may learn just a little bit by virtue of what fit in that context window, but no, it's not going deeper into the neural network or anything, so that when somebody else tries it, or you come in tomorrow, right, you're still starting from ground zero, as far as I can tell. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions?
Well, the point I was trying to make in my presentation was in regard to what Gary was just saying, is the fact that we have learned through the years to build systems based on cognitive models that deal with short-term memory and long-term memory and semantic type memory. There's a lot of work going on right now about bringing knowledge graph into the play, where rather than pulling in vectors from chunk of documents, I'm actually pulling in chunk of knowledge graph or adding to the knowledge graph. So if you think of it as the long-term memory is a knowledge graph that is built from what it's doing, then you can pull that in the real time. So we're moving away from the LLM itself. So even right now, when you're dealing with ChatGPT, a lot of people think that's all the LLM doing, but there's a lot of mechanics that are not LLMs. All the memory, all these things are in fact procedural code in their case, and we're on the side saying, oh, you know what? We know how to do that with symbolic type of approach. We've been doing that for years.
Yeah, you're right. There's there's at least these two extensions that I've looked at a little bit. One is this code interpreter, and that has a whole lot of extra mechanism, right? Including just a loop, right? Where normally you don't get a loop. This has a loop, and it has a Python sandbox, and it knows, quite a bit of the, the data science libraries and visualization and things like that, right? So that's just an entire separate subsystem, like almost like a community or a society of experts, right? And LLM is just one, one voice in this community. And the other one that they have, which they aren't tied together, is the ability to call. So you can register APIs to be called with this other one. There's like weather and news and Wikipedia and things like that, right? And so it will analyze what you said, and then if it matches sort of the API signature of one of these services that it knows how to call, it'll call it and then come back with the results, and then put natural language around that and then tell it to you, and so in that way you get sort of current events and current things. But it's not what you're saying, learning from your mistakes, but that's one of the hacks around not having to do it, whatever it is, now $100 million retraining, every few weeks to keep up with the New York Times, right? I mean, you can't do that. So you have to have these other mechanisms. So you have the LLM, which is kind of the, almost like a long-term thought patterns and deep knowledge and, like things that don't change. And you have to couple that with, these other techniques, right, that get blended together. And so, that's what I think is kind of, the next level of interest above just sort of the bare level LLM, as Denis was saying. Yep.
Yeah, because I can't remember who made, I think it was Alan that made that comment today, which is quite truthful, is that large language models are great, because they use language, and for human, it's such an accessible thing. But us scientific type of people learned long time ago that language was not a very good way to deal with some abstract concept. So we invented mathematics so we could better manipulate and express these concepts. We invented symbolic kind of manipulation so we could do this more precisely. So I think the pendulum will swing back. Now we're in the height of the language-based interface, but the pendulum will swing back and saying, okay, we need a lot more symbolic and structured type of approach, and use the LLM as an interface. It's a way to tell human and explain things. So in one example that I'm doing in the healthcare industry, we're using the LLM to generate explanation to the patient. So we scaffold the prompt and the response of the LLM with the particular data about the patient, so that the prompt can generate in language what is less explainable from structured chart or other type of decisions. And the real benefit of this kind of approach is that imagine you're a practitioner and the person in front of you has very poor English, or has only, primary school level of English, or has low-level Spanish understanding. Then the LLM can recast the language generation according to those parameters. And I think that's where the key value is in the short term. In the long term, we'll see where we take those technologies.
Jan?
Yeah, let me point out that we are co-locating with the RuleML conference, which at this moment is running during the daytime in Europe. So it's a little difficult, but anyway, which is exactly about declarative AI and symbolic AI and trying to combine this with generative AI. It's one of the hot topics there. So for those of you who are interested and are registered, if you are free tomorrow morning, it's an interesting debate which is going on at both sides now. How can we combine those items?
Yeah. By the way, it was strange.
Tomorrow, just before my presentation, I'll be flying to Oslo because I want to be there in person. So it might be a little difficult, but anyway.
Jan, Jan, isn't it only you present talking about generative AI, anti-declarative AI? It's you're the only presenter. There are several more.
There are a few more papers about.
Because if you listen what Sam Altman and other people, experts says that it's not that these real results coming not from this time, not from academy, but more from practitioners, and that's kind of a little bit surprising. The academy a little bit behind, but hopefully together we will get better results.
Academy is never behind. Academy is never behind. They're only too far ahead.
Okay.
And anyway, in computer science, we just reinvent the wheel with a different name every 5 or 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to stress one important thing what just Denis said. It was also today mentioned about self-learning and steer yourself and steer your organization. That's Alan said, right? And self-learning, that somehow we all came to conclusion that this is the most important thing, to put our system, our decision makers in self-learning environment when we're modifying our automatically generated rules based on results of our decisions. That's a question what I asked Gary. And this is, I don't know why this element is missing. Probably it's too far away, people trying to solve more practical problems right now. But with only self-learning, for example, put chess in absolutely new position. People try to automate chess for years, right? And only after AlphaGo, they just created simple programs that did not learn from all human chess players. You just played against yourself 24 hours and it became on higher levels than anybody else in the world. So it's learning from its own decisions. If we I think we have unique position to compare with general community who is interested in generative AI, to put this in place together. That's even when James Taylor made the simplify picture of DMN, that's this era with dotted era with circle, right? When it's links source to specific decision table, a specific decision, that's something what we already ahead of other communities from this perspective. Hopefully we can, as a decision management community, can do something better. And I just, I promise not to do philosophical points, but still I wanted to say when Denis, you said LLM, not clear what is this. I hope we should, as a community, we should concentrate more on not LLM, but SLM, small language models specific for particular domains. Let other people concentrate on big concept, general concept, but concentrate on particular domains. In health, for example, domain, have 20 different health specific. For diabetes, it's a special domain. And the same thing, you go to financial services, you split them to many verticals, and you adding a specific small language models. And it means that's the way how to avoid hallucinations, that's the way how to produce very specific decisions. Even as this, when we have these committees in each vertical, like Denis, you have right now in medical domain, right? When you have medical experts. So if this works, we will end up with not just any document, but with a proved knowledge source. because not any PDF document, but this particular PDF document approved by this committee, like in Accord or in the MISMA standard, only experts will tell, feed this with this document, our system with this document. That's why I'm talking about small language models. Okay, anyway, do we have more questions? Or probably it's enough for today. Okay, thank you everybody for good first day. Everybody tired and it's late in Europe, I understand. Thank you very much. And we will see all of you tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and I will try to stay late and publish all recordings tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you,
Okay.
Jacob.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye.
Thanks
See you guys
all.
again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.